Canes fans, what's going on? Peter Rees here, bringing you another edition of the CanesInSight podcast. And today, I have Javi Salas joining me to preview the Canes baseball season, of course, starting this Friday at the Light, at home against NJIT, starting off the JD Arteaga era at the helm. Of course, JD's been at Miami all these years, but he wants to make his own mark now on this program. He's brought in a new staff, new way of operating down there in Coral Gables, and I know they're excited for things to get going. Before that, wanted to let you guys know that this episode is brought to you by Sallah Astarita Cox, LLC, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Their lawyers have over 100 years of collective experience handling securities and white-collar criminal matters, including investigations, regulatory proceedings, and enforcement actions in federal, state, and administrative courts. They've also handled investigations conducted by congressional committees. The firm's partners draw from past experiences working at the SEC, the Department of Justice, a national brokerage house, and on Wall Street. Their in-depth experience includes representing clients with matters involving securities regulation, white-collar criminal defense, securities arbitration and litigation, and complex civil litigations and appeals. Again, Sallah Astarita Cox, LLC. You can contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit their website at salahlaw.com. Coming up next here on the CanesInSight podcast, Javi Salas joins me to take a look at this upcoming season for Canes baseball. All right, Canes fans, excited to be joined now by Javi Salas, a frequent contributor to the CanesInSight podcast, especially this time of year as the baseball season comes rolling around. Excited to have you tonight, Jav. Appreciate you joining the show. How you doing?
I'm good, Pete. Good to be back. Feels like our yearly contribution on the CanesInSight podcast. It's usually good things. Spring has sprung and baseball season's right around the corner.
Canes kicking the season off this week, this Friday, at home against NJIT at Alex Rodriguez Park at Mark Light Field. And of course, this is the official start of the JD Arteaga era as head coach here at Miami, of course, replacing Gino DeMare. Javi, I know you just had a chance to be around the team a bit at the opening season banquet last week, I believe it was. And obviously, JD was your pitching coach at Miami, so you have a close familiarity with him, with his style of coaching, with him personally, right? So there's a lot that we can get into in terms of that side of things. But in your recent experience around the team, I mean, what are the vibes like? I know everyone always excited this time of year, but the fresh page has been turned.
Yeah, definitely, Pete. I think, just speaking on this past weekend, right? So it was Alumni weekend back at Mark Light. On Friday night, we had a alumni cocktail party, which I think it was a record turnout in terms of alumni. Over 110 alumni came out on Friday night. It was a great event. Dan Radakovich, the athletic director, sort of set the stage for JD. JD gave a State of the Union address, talked about this year's team. But I think there's definitely been a renewed sense of energy around the program. A lot of alumni that hadn't come back in quite some time were around. And that just, segued into Saturday, the alumni game. We got our first chance to see the ball club in action, what looks like would be the starting lineup. So I think from just a vibes perspective, this time of year is great for the program. Pete, you get guys coming back. You got alumni excited. The fan base is excited. So 2 weekends in a row where they had Fan Fest 2 weeks ago. This weekend alumni game. Next weekend opening night. So it's a great time to be around the park. A great time to be around the program. It's going to be a young club. JD talked about it extensively. I know you and I will get into that here, but it's going to be a young club. They lost a whole lot of firepower last year. But it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for JD, exciting time for the program. I'm sure those guys can't wait for Friday night.
And let's just get right into it. Again, this podcast, of course, brought to you by Sallah Astarita Cox, LLC. And taking a look at the pitching side of things here, Javi, we understand this is a team that seems like it's always going to have bats and always going to have runs scored. But the pitching side here, I think that's probably going to be under the microscope this season. A lot of new faces there. And of course, JD, his background as a pitching coach, I know that's an area that's going to be a huge focal point for the team this year.
Yeah, definitely a lot of questions at this time of the year. Certainly, going into a season, you'd like to have your pitching staff, your rotation, your bullpen sort of set in stone. But I think up until this weekend, those probably more questions than answers. And I think, the alumni game usually gives you a pretty good idea of what that weekend rotation would look like. Herrick Hernandez, a Miami-Dade junior college transfer, started that game. That sort of leads you to believe that he'll be the Sunday starter with Rafe Schlesinger and Gage Zeal Friday and Saturday, however they want to dice it up. In my opinion, I'd start Gage on Friday. He's more of a known commodity around the program. Been a 2-year starter for JD. Done some really good stuff on the weekend. Has pitched in some big games. And I think, especially early on in the season, you want to lean on your experience, especially with a young ball club. So I expect Gage to take the ball on Friday night and be the Friday night starter. And the one I'm really excited about is Rafe Schlesinger. He's really came into his own at the end of last season, had an incredible outing against Texas in the regional semifinal game. Funky delivery, left-hander. One of those guys that you're going to look back later on in the season and realize that, he's probably going to get some draft looks. He's going to be on some boards late and definitely his stock will rise if he can do well in the weekend rotation in a very, very tough ACC. Speaking on the bullpen side of things, you lose a guy like Andrew Walters, one of the best closers in University of Miami history. You definitely have some big shoes to fill. We're certainly, looking forward to some freshmen stepping up. There's a bunch of guys in the mix. I'd be hard pressed to say that, JD has his, bullpen set in stone at this point of the year. I think, especially early on in the season, we're going to see a lot of guys throw. We're going to see a lot of guys get into the game. And ultimately, hopefully as you start getting into conference play, he'll have that bullpen more materialized. You'll have guys in solidified roles. And ultimately, you want to hit your stride as you get into, the end of conference play and into the postseason.
Now, we look at this lineup. Obviously, a lot of stuff that's not going to be there from last season. Do you feel pretty confident, though, that they'll be able to score runs this year?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at last year's stats and, some eye-popping numbers from some guys who left the program, right? You replace a Yo-Yo Morales at third base, a 3-year starter, second-round pick of the Washington Nationals, all-world, all-everything. You had a first baseman, C.J. Kafis. I mean, another guy who was, shoe-in, 2-year starter for Coach Arteaga. And then you had Zach Levinson. You had the likes of Don Patelli, who were really, really solid starters, did really well in the minors last year. Those are 60 home runs you're trying to replace. Now, that's not a small number. That's over 50% of what they hit last year. And those guys ain't coming back. They ain't strapping them up this year. So definitely some guys will need to step up. There's a freshman at third base, Daniel Cuvée, who's gotten a lot of notoriety this offseason in the fall and into the spring, was projected to be a high draft pick out of high school, out of the Elite Squad Academy in Fort Lauderdale. You have Jason Torres at first base, who's going to have some big shoes to fill. He was around last year, didn't really get a whole lot of at-bats, but definitely expected to fill some big shoes. And then, you got Lorenzo Carrier in left field. You have the transfer Lucas Costello from Wake Forest. So those guys will definitely need to step up and fill those big gaping holes in that lineup. Now on the returning side, we have Edgardo Villegas in center field, a mix between him and Jacoby Long. I don't know how JD is going to dice that up. And obviously the focal point of every scouting report this year, Pete's going to be Blake Sear at second base. I think he really burst onto the scene last year. Obviously, he had a much more protection in that lineup with hitting behind Yo-Yo. Obviously going to see a lot more breaking balls. As I mentioned, he's going to be the focal point of every single scouting report meeting for every team that comes into Mark Stadium. So I'm really excited to see Blake. He's a big personality. Always plays with a big smile. I think fans love him. And now they're going to get more of an opportunity to really, fall in love with his style of player. I think he's a Miami guy through and through, and I'm really excited to see what he's got this year.
Antonio Jimenez, another youngster, another local guy that I know some people are excited about. Not sure if he'll be a starter right off the bat there, but he could be a guy that also comes into the mix at some point as well.
Yeah, definitely, Pete. I think, shortstop is one of those positions where it like takes a little bit of development before you throw a guy out there. And definitely as a freshman, you want to make sure that a guy like Antonio is ready to go. I predict that JD Urso, the transfer from University of Tampa, will start at short, but that's not to say that Antonio is not going to be in the mix. Antonio, I think Dorian Gonzalez is another guy who's had a really hot spring. 3 hits in the Alumni game. I know yesterday in the scrimmage he hit really well as well. So JD's got a lot of options at his disposition, especially from the hitting standpoint. When you obviously want guys, experienced guys off the bench, so he's definitely going to have those. How he pencils those 9 guys in every day is going to be the bigger question. But ultimately, I do think this team will score runs. I think the biggest focal point will be, can they keep runs off the board from the pitching standpoint?
And you look at this, staff turnover. Like I said, obviously JD has been there for as long as he's been there, and his familiarity across South Florida and across college baseball as a whole. But it does feel like with the staff that he's brought in, right, that there is some new energy, some new juice there. What have you heard? Obviously, Laz Gutierrez coming in, a guy who has been down here in South Florida, has had a lot of success at Nova Southeastern. And then Darren Fenster coming in with his, expertise, I should say, his experience, right, at the major league level. Bringing those sort of hires in here, based off what you're hearing, what sort of impact should we expect from those additions?
Yeah, I think, Pete, you know that right on the head. There's a renewed juice around the program with some of these hires, right? I think, you see in college football, there's these programs that bring in former head coaches, right, to be position coaches. And we see it so much in the SEC, and you're starting to see it now more in the ACC. But, JD solidified his staff with a guy like Laz Gutierrez, who one of the best D2 programs in the country at Nova Southeastern. He brings in Rob Cooper to have a more of a front office role, the former head coach at Penn State, former Miami Hurricane. And then the biggest hire of the offseason was Darren Fenster, prying him away from the Boston Red Sox, where he had a lot of success in the minor leagues, was a field coordinator, sort of worked up and down their minor league system. And the Red Sox, one of the biggest name brands in Major League Baseball. So, a guy like Darren's going to come in here and really, bring a ton of wisdom, a ton of expertise. And I think what this coaching staff was really looking for, like you mentioned, was just a renewed energy. A lot of the staff was brought into this situation, understanding that JD was going to be the guy. But I think JD's done a good job of delegating a lot of the tasks out to, his assistants. I know Darren's going to have full control over the hitting and the hitting operation. I know that's something that, as from a professional standpoint, is one of the biggest things you see between college and the professional ranks, is how they approach hitting. And from everybody I've talked to, Coach Fenster's, philosophy on hitting is A1. We're going to see it right away. I know in the Alumni game, I was really impressed. A lot of the alumni in the dugout were talking about, while the runs weren't coming easily that night, some of the swings, the aggressiveness, the approach was something that was palpable. You could see it. So I think we're going to see some of these young guys really take big leaps. And that's really what you want to see, especially when you have a guy like, Cavey, Torres, Jimenez, guys who haven't had a whole lot of at-bats are going to get professional style coaching at a very young age. That's got to be something that really excites this program and the current crop of players, and then the future crop of players when they look at from a recruiting standpoint.
Now, looking at this team overall as a whole, we've kind of dived into different aspects of it up to this point. But what would you say are the strengths and weaknesses of this team right now? Obviously, season kicking off this Friday at home against NJIT at home. If you have not been to a Canes baseball game, I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you've been to the light and have been out there for a game. But even if you aren't huge on baseball, man, what a great experience it is out there. Great time to get out there with the kids, with the family, right? So again, season starts this Saturday coming up here. What, like I said in the question, Hav, strengths and weaknesses in your estimation?
Yeah, so I'll start with a weakness. I think right now the uncertainty of the bullpen is something that I definitely circle. That's not to say it's going to be a weakness all season long. It's just an opportunity for a lot of freshmen and more of the unknown guys to step up and really solidify their roles. the bullpen is a really fluid mix of guys, Pete. I mean, the guys who, pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th on weekend one may look totally different, at the end of April going into May and into conference tournament play. So you definitely want to have guys step up. You want to see guys develop. You want to see guys come in and get their feet wet. It's a long season, but the implications out of the gate are huge. Miami plays a really tough schedule. So you want to see those bullpen guys develop. You want to see some of those freshmen take leaps, especially early on. I think the strength of the team, and you can't really quantify this, but I think the youth is going to be a strength. You're going to see a team that is going to develop. They're going to get better. They're going to be pretty fearless. I think that's one of the things that you want to see, especially early on in this JD era, is how do they come out and play? What is their attitude like? They're going to be tested right out of the gate. We talked about they have 4 games on opening weekend, which is a little rare, something you don't see too often, but I'm sure everybody's going to have circled that 3rd weekend of the year against University of Florida coming into town. They're going to be ranked in the top 5. So we'll find out very early on what this team is made of. And you don't want to look ahead, but with a young ball club, it's going to be, JD's going to have his fingerprints all over this roster, all over, the outcomes of these games. And I think when you look at this roster, when you look at what's being built, you have to be excited as a Canes fan. I think with guys like Blake Sear, Dorian Gonzalez, Lorenzo Carrier, the experience of a Lucas Costello coming from Wake Forest, you have a nice mix of experience, and then you sprinkle in the young guys who, like I said, are going to get better once they get their at-bats. This coaching staff, their fingerprints are going to be all over this roster. And I think, come end of April into May, this ball club is going to be rounding into shape and hopefully, make a run for a bid in Omaha.
Realistic expectations or goals. Obviously, the way the season ended last year and then Gino stepping down as abruptly as that all happened, I don't think that you could have looked into the crystal ball a year ago and seen the situation that we're coming into right now as a program. So what would you say are realistic expectations? This is a program that is accustomed to hosting regionals and had been accustomed to hosting super regionals, but of course looking to get back to that year in, year out.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the expectation around this program is and always will be Omaha berths and national championships. I don't think that changes with this roster. I don't think that changes with JD. I know it doesn't change with JD. But you look at it from let's not mince words here. The ACC is as tough as it's ever been. We're looking at 6 or 7 ranked teams, depending on the publication that you look at in the polls. This Miami team is unranked for what seems like the first time in a very long time going into a season. So it's not very often that you can look at a club at Miami and say they're not ranked, on February 12th going into a season, right? So definitely a lot to prove for this club. I'm excited for them. I think they were picked 4th in the Coastal Division of the ACC, which again is, something they can put on the bulletin board, and these young guys can understand that not every game is going to be an easy win, and this isn't high school anymore. This is a tough conference. They're going to be challenged. Miami always plays a national schedule. Their midweek games are tough. There's nowhere to hide. I think JD's got these guys prepared. I know in his address to the alumni, he was extremely positive. He was very optimistic on this club, whilst stating the very obvious that they're a little bit disrespected by some of the polls, and I'm sure that's been discussed by some of the coaching staff. I'm sure the guys know very well where they stand nationally and from that standpoint. So realistically, I think like I said, the goal doesn't change. It's Omaha or bust. I think every program, every team is defined by their expectations, and at Miami, it's Omaha. So I don't think that's changed. I don't think it will change. Now, realistically, I think there are going to be some growing pains with this team. I think we're going to, understand that they are young, understand that there are a lot of new guys taking on different roles that they're not particularly used to. But again, this coaching staff is very experienced. They're very well versed in what they're doing. They know what it takes to win. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see these guys develop. I'm excited to see what this team looks like in April and early May. And, I know JD, I know he's going to have these guys ready. I know these guys are going to play for each other. They're going to have the alumni backing all throughout. So it's an exciting time to be a Hurricane fan.
Before I let you go, I need to pull up this video here. It was an at-bat that occurred this weekend at the pull it up here. So we have this at bat. Let me pause it real quick. Let me try to get it full screen here. I don't know if it's going to go full screen, so I'll keep it here. But we have an at bat here from this weekend, the Alumni game. Chance Mack, former Canes great. I mean, walk me through what's happening here, Hav.
Pete, let me just,
let me rewind it real quick here. We'll start from the top.
The Alumni come into this game not having taken very many at bats in a long time, and I know Chance had a hitting streak in Alumni games, so we were hyping him up in the dugout, making sure that he understood, like, it's a big at bat. Chance, don't go down without a fight. And he did. I mean, he was getting some fastballs blown by him, but Chance did make contact. I'll give him credit. Fouled a couple balls off. Ultimately fell victim to the swinging strikeout. But, thankfully for Chance, I think he came back in one piece. I think it's what he wanted. But, unfortunately, his hitting streak in Alumni games ended on Saturday night. But great at bat by Chance. We're hyping up. I know Mike took this video. I know he came from the basketball game, did a doubleheader. Mike went from the UNC basketball game to the Alumni game. So we appreciate the committed fans like that. But, Chance will get back in the lab. If I know Chance, he'll be back. He'll be back next year and we'll start a new streak.
Chance stays in shape, man. He's got fierce fit going on. So he's good. But no, man, rough at bat there. But like you said, he had a hit streak going on. So we commend him for giving it a go and putting it on the line. He's just got to start a new one next year.
Yeah, man. And look, I give a lot of Alumni credit. They come out and they perform. Alex Cora, manager of the Red Sox, he's starting shortstop for the Alumni, which is very cool. Got an at bat. I know he mentioned prior to the game that his little boys hadn't seen him hit ever in a game, so he really wanted them to, have him take an at bat and see how, unfortunately he went down swinging as well. But it was a great event, great turnout by the Alumni. Kept it close there until about the 7th or 8th, and then the good guys pulled away and sealed the victory. But a great turnout on Saturday night.
Well, Hav, appreciate that breakdown there of the Chance Mack at bat. But of course, the preseason preview as we do every year here, and we're going to be hearing more from you here coming up. Canes fans, stay tuned. I know a lot of people looking for more Canes baseball content. That is coming in the very near future here as the season gears up this Friday at the Light. And then, of course, Florida coming to town in a few weeks here. So that one, always the first series that everyone really circles on the calendar. We'll definitely be getting you all ready for that one in the coming weeks. Hav, thank you once again, and we'll be hearing from you soon.
Thanks, Pete. Go Canes.